Welcome to Everything's Fucked podcast, where you haven't been fucked till you've heard everything's fucked. You're here with Monica.
And Asia.
And today we have a special guest for you guys. I'm super excited about it. Her name is Jami, and she goes by the Neurodivergent Nurse on Instagram. She has her own podcast. We're talking about ADHD today and, like all sorts of other things. So, Jami, would you mind introducing yourself for us?
Yeah. So my name is Jami Fregeau. I am the host, as you said, of the Neurodivergent Nurse podcast. I'm a registered nurse. I've been a nurse for about 10, 11, 12 years. I don't know how long, but enough time to, have that title. And I was diagnosed with ADHD in December of 2020. So the whole ADHD thing is brand new.
It's new.
Wow, I didn't know
it's
that.
a new identity. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Wow. So you went that whole time without knowing.
Yeah, it's a secret. No, I'm just kidding.
Asia, that whole time, I'm like, how old do you think she
Exclusive
is?
info.
So what prompted you to get tested for it? Or was that just like an offshoot of going to therapy, or you just started recognizing things in yourself? Like, how did that come about?
That's a great question that a lot of people ask me that know me in real life as well, because I don't hide behind anything other than transparency with ADHD, because I think in general, mental health in this country, in the United States, that is such a struggle, and there's so much shame revolving around just who we are as people.
Yeah.
And anyhow, I had a friend, and she very kindly asked me one day, we were very close, and she said, have you ever been evaluated for ADHD? I was like, no. Because in my head, I'm thinking of the 6-year-old little boy that can't sit still at a desk and he's always moving. And that certainly wasn't me. I was the well-behaved, I had to follow all the rules type of girl growing up. And she noticed things like rejection sensitivity, that I always thought that everyone hated me, and I was so sensitive to anyone even thinking something not perfect about me. And I also had a lot of social anxiety and things like that, why would anybody think that was associated with ADHD?
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. And she asked me that, and she started sending me information about ADHD in women.
Yes.
And I was like, oh my gosh, there's 8,000 boxes, and I check every one of them. What is happening right now? So that's kind of how the diagnosis or the desire to be evaluated came about.
Okay. Yeah, it's really interesting because the concept and idea of ADHD is very male focused. And so when we talk about women with ADHD, it's kind of like almost still a new concept, even though it's not really. And so it's one of those things where you're finding all of these women getting diagnosed with ADHD later in life because they were so good at masking. And for women, and young girls were kind of told like, hey, like you need to present this way and you need to look like this and you need to do these things. And so not a lot, but commonly women with ADHD, they grow up not looking like they have ADHD because they are getting good grades. They are good students. They are sort of this perfectionist kind of thing because they're masking all of their symptoms to kind of adhere to like social society, like standards and things like that. So I love that your friend like kind of felt comfortable enough to be like, hey, like, have you ever thought about looking into this? Because
especially because I'm so sensitive to rejection. So
that
was very bold.
That took real courage, to do that.
I have one of my sisters was just recently diagnosed with ADHD, and I was like, oh, okay. Like I never would have thought to like kind of put that on her at all. And like, I never really saw that, even though my daughter is ADHD. But as soon as she started talking to me, I was like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. Like that explains so many different things, like growing up and the way that she responded to different things and how she presents herself now and the structure that she needs in her life and things like that. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, this is, like so good for her. And so do you feel like getting that ADHD diagnosis and like learning more about it has helped you?
Oh, Monica.
I know it's a hard one.
No, it's not at all. It is so hard for someone who hasn't been through it to understand, which is not a bad thing. But when I tell you that there were certain things my mom had to fill out a questionnaire about me. And I had to fill out something that I saw about myself, a questionnaire as well. And then they did some tests that I had to push a button when I saw certain objects and certain colors. And there was something on my forehead that tracked my movement during that time. And after that, I met up with a psychiatrist who specialized in adult ADHD, a woman psychiatrist as well, who I felt like was a carbon copy of me. But when she told me that I had that diagnosis and she started telling me things about myself, when she would say, oh, yeah, and I bet this is how you communicate, and I bet that this is the struggles that you've had, I started crying.
Yeah.
And I'm not emotional about me. I'm emotional about other people. I'm very tenderhearted when it comes to
You're making
anyone
me
but
emotional
me.
about this.
Me too.
I know.
Yeah, I will never be able to articulate well enough the weight that I didn't know I was carrying that was lifted off of me, and to finally see myself as not being lazy, to see myself as not being a slob that I was called by my ex-husband for years, for not being all the things that I heard about myself and what I heard others say about me, that it wasn't the core of me. It was because of how my brain was, and that I just didn't have the appropriate systems to accomplish and combat living in a world that wasn't made for me. It was incredible.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter just recently said that to me, and it's one of those things where she has combined ADHD. So she really struggles with like a lot of executive functioning, a lot of social things, emotional regulation. And so, we were having a conversation the other day, and she just sort of broke down, and she kind of said, like, I just feel like I'm living in a world that I don't belong to, and that I don't know how to fit into, and I don't know how to connect with people in the way that they expect me to. And she said it's overwhelming for her because, school is set up for people who are neurotypical. It's set up for everyday people to follow these structures and these procedures, and you're supposed to act this way and you're supposed to present this way. And so what happens when you take somebody who doesn't think like that, their brain just actually does not work like that, and you put them in that, that area, and you put them in that school, and you put them in these jobs, and you expect them to function like everybody else, and what that does to those people and to these kids and to adults even growing up. And you just start thinking, like, how hard would that be to function and just feel so misunderstood by people so often. So
it's not even the misunderstood token, which is a big part of it.
Yeah.
But not only that, and you feel like you're inadequate, because even if you're existing in a world that was set up for other people, you should be able to rise to meet that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm 5'0" and I can't reach a lot of things on a high shelf, but I can pull up a step stool or climb on a counter and get things out. So we should be able to rise to that. But those of us with ADHD, the difficulty there is so much harder than climbing on a counter, right? And that is, I think, the hardest part is you can't be good enough. That feeling of never being able to just meet the bare minimum of what your expectation is because of what society tells you is the bare minimum.
Yeah. I think that's what my daughter's going through. My daughter was diagnosed in 2007. She's 23. And back then, like, ADHD was just for boys. We would go to therapies, and it would be a room full of boys, which was not good because she didn't have impulse control. She has the combined type also. So it was very difficult for her. And I would tell her all of her shortcomings all the time and point them out and be like, but be better, do better. You know what I mean? So she definitely has that in her, like, never going to be adequate enough. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really hard.
It's really hard to go through.
I feel like you kind of just like sort of pointed out like what maybe your least favorite part of having ADHD is, but do you have something that's like your favorite? Because like watching my daughter grow up, there's like so many things about her and the way that she functions in this world where I'm like, that's really hard and frustrating and things like that. But there's so many things where I'm like, this is so amazing. Like the way your brain works is so awesome. And the way that you like think of things and the way you are so creative and just like
artistic
and articulate, and the way she can just sort of like know all of this information all of the time. And it's just stuff that you're like, how do you even know that? It's just
like
so
a superpower.
Wild.
It really is a superpower. Some parts of ADHD, in my opinion. Yeah.
But do you have something where you're like, this is my favorite part of having ADHD?
My favorite part is I am so thirsty for knowledge. And I appreciate that about myself. I'm
Yeah.
very inquisitive, and I'm a nurse. For the 18th time, in case you didn't know, but I used to be a neuro ICU nurse. So I deal with the
Okay.
brain, which is
Yeah.
crazy.
That
My
is crazy.
specialty and focus was always the brain,
Yeah.
and I loved it. But I now am a rapid response nurse for the last 3 years. So we're 911 inside the hospital, essentially.
Okay.
We go to all the code blues, code strokes, and people see you as so smart, but yet so calm, because someone's life may have just stopped and you have to
Yeah.
bring it back, but you're cool, calm, and collected under it. And it's a cascade of things that just open up in my head when I get to a room and there's a crisis, especially in healthcare. I love healthcare, but I see all the things in front of me and I'm able to easily pick them out to figure out what to do next, to bring someone back, to rehabilitate someone to what they desire.
Yeah.
I love that about me, that opens up and that I don't have that chaos inside my head, that I'm calmness in the midst of the tornado and hurricane.
Yeah. That's really amazing. I love that you like think about it that way too, and that you're like appreciative of
Oh,
how
yeah.
you are with it. Cause I think that's so important. There's a lot of like negative feedback with
Yes.
people who are neurodivergent. And so I feel like when you are able to sort of like self-reflect and be like, what is it that is it makes me special? And what is it about me that I love, not just that, other people might love. So I just love that so much. So you just said you're inquisitive by nature, you love learning. And is that kind of like what sort of pushed you kind of to be like an educator in some sense about ADHD and what that looks like for you?
Yeah, you are right on. I don't think that anyone has ever connected those dots without hearing me say that that's
Yeah.
why I've gone into really the neurodivergency, because you don't know what you don't know,
I
period.
say that all the
Exactly.
time.
Yeah. And just like me, I cannot, if anyone were to meet me in a social setting, they would think, oh, she's so bubbly. She has a big personality. She's so fun and friendly and kind and those things. My social anxiety was so high that I would have panic attacks that I couldn't get out of a car, that my friend didn't show up and we were going to watch someone else run a foot race.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get out of a car to walk towards a group of people that didn't know me, just to see somebody run across the finish line and just be paralyzed and trapped inside your own body. And I think back to those days. If I would have known that ADHD was the issue, was the culprit, and there were ways for me to start seeing myself through a different set of lenses,
Yeah.
that my life would have been different. I'm thankful for how it is. I
Yeah.
have always had a great support system when we didn't know it had anything to do with ADHD. But I feel the desire that I can do the research for everyone else that has similar
Yeah.
struggles. And they would say, oh, that sounds just like me. I never knew. And by my job, I know how to put things into non-medical ways, right? To have a
Yeah.
conversation with someone that may have an 8th grade education for them to understand. And that is a talent that I have from what I have worked on for the past 10 plus years.
Yeah.
And sure, I absolutely have the desire, because just helping one person not have to struggle tomorrow is worth every ounce of it, and worth my focus and my time,
Oh
certainly.
my gosh.
That's how we
I
feel
honestly love
too.
that so
That's
much.
how we feel about the podcast.
Yeah.
We
That's
want
why
to,
we're like always trying to find people like you to connect with, to
yeah,
share. And yeah,
we
it's
want to
just
normalize the
great.
human experience. We want everybody to feel like their experience is like everybody else's experience. We're all in this together. We're like a tribe.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, I'm such an advocate too. One of the things that people with ADHD, that scientifically it has proven that we are more forward when it comes to social justice, that we may not stand up for ourselves well, but we
Yeah.
certainly go to bat for other people that struggle. And that is another thing that I really love about me, because I see the world that every person deserves to hold space here.
Yes.
And every person is valid, and we all make mistakes. And I'm thankful that I have not had to suffer the consequence of every poor mistake that I've had. But for people just to feel that they are deserving of love, that they are deserving to be here, is so important.
It really is.
I've never heard that before, but that actually is really interesting that you say that, because my daughter is definitely that way. She's always like an advocate for other people, an advocate for anyone. She really struggles with maybe advocating for herself, but she is definitely all about like social justices and like how she can help
really
other
is.
people. And she's very vocal about it. And so when you say that, I'm like, oh my gosh, that really makes sense, because yeah, I care about social issues too, but the way that she's like so passionate about,
she's like
other
a pit bull about
people.
it.
Yeah. Yes, she is.
She really is. And when we were at Not Inspired Farm, she was like going in for other people like all day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love that.
She's pretty amazing with that. So, okay. So when you started this journey of, like Instagram, the podcast, and like your ADHD diagnosis and all that stuff, did you set out to kind of like see where it would go? Like, did you have a plan for what you were doing? I mean, your podcast seems to be doing well. Your Instagram, you've got a lot of followers there, a lot of people that you're interacting with. And so I'm just curious, is like, did you see it kind of like getting this big for you, or just started out to see what would happen?
No, I had a podcast prior for about 2 or 3 years before the Neurodivergent Nurse. That while we're talking about social justice, the name of it is First Do No Harm. And the concept behind that was that in my mind, nurses, doctors, people in healthcare, if let's say there was a bombing and people died, people were injured, and I get to work and the patient I have to take care of is that person who set off the bomb, what do I have to do?
Right.
I have to treat that person like a person. I have to pour my energy into that person having the best outcome, no matter what they did.
Yeah.
And just because I walk outside of the walls of a hospital, that should never change. Yes. And that podcast it focused on things like trans individuals. It focused on things like abortion. It focused on things that were controversial and things that people fear because they don't know about it. And I thought it was a great opportunity for someone to have to listen and not be able to talk.
Yeah.
And to be able to hear, and to be able to hear that experience from the individual, to start to break down the concepts that we've heard from media or from our community and things like that, to get the real raw stuff. So I did that for a couple of years and enjoyed it. It was real hit or miss. And when I got the diagnosis of ADHD, I was like, this would be a great thing to pour into, because it could also help people.
Yeah.
I didn't see it going as great as what it has. I'm grateful for it, but I just enjoy podcasting. I enjoy Instagram and educating and the people that I get to interact with. So the answer is no. I didn't think that it was going to be as big as what it has become, but I am very thankful and I've enjoyed every minute of it.
I love that. And I think too, like when you're helping to educate other people, you're also educating yourself. And so I'm sure it's been great for you as like a learning process of like how your brain works and things like that. So I think it's awesome that you even started that and just like said like, hey, this is what I want to do right now. So this is what I'm going to do. So
when you went to nursing school, I have a question. When you went to nursing school, did anybody else notice anything like ADHD, or none of your teachers, like your whole life, nobody ever pointed it out to you?
I noticed that I wasn't smart. I noticed that it was
from the traditional sense.
Yeah. It was harder for me than everyone else. That I have always had the mentality that I can do anything I put my mind to. My parents raised me to believe that I really could, and I thought that. And I went to nursing school and I withdrew my second semester and I took a year off because I didn't think that I was going to be able to pass my finals, but I withdrew passing. But the teacher told me, we can't teach you to critically think. This is something that you either have or you don't. It's okay. That was embarrassing. I was so ashamed that everyone knew that I just wasn't as smart as what they had thought my entire life. Because my previous degree, I was on the dean's list, and I cheered middle school, high school, and college, and I was captain, and I had a good history. But nursing school was hard. I did not know why it was so difficult, because you had 4 right answers. What's the best right answer? There's no logic behind it, because I don't know whose brain you want me to
think from.
Say, yeah, but if you give me black and white, I can answer it easily. But if you give me a bunch of different shades of gray, I don't know what that is. And so I went back after a year off, and I passed, and I graduated. And the dean I knew of the college, it was a small community college, and the dean, he told me that he had asked when I came back how I was doing, and the teacher said, I just don't really think she's going to make it. And he's like, so you should be proud that you did. And then my first job in the hospital, I had to do 3 months on the floor before I moved to the ICU. And the manager said, I just don't think you have what it takes to be an ICU nurse, but you would make a great floor nurse. And still I'm thinking, I'm just not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not these things. And I knew that my struggles were very different than how people were trying to teach me things. And even my priorities and juggling everything, it just didn't make sense why I had such a hard time with it. No one saw it, but I did. But I thought that it was just because I'm not good enough. And my mom was just so encouraging and inspirational. And there was a thing that I read from Mother Teresa that I read a lot during that time as a reminder, and it kept me grounded. And from that point, less than a year later, I moved to Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and I got a job in neuro ICU that I did not meet the qualifications for. My preceptor alluded that I wasn't smart in front of me one time. And then 6 months after that, I was precepting on the unit. I got a job a year later as their dedicated charge nurse. Wow. And then I started traveling in 2015, and I worked at Johns Hopkins, Yale, Mass Gen, Duke, Rose Neurologic Institute. Worked at 6 of the top 50 hospitals in the country for neurology and neurosurgery. And yeah, I'm just glad that even though everyone told me I wasn't smart enough and I didn't have what it took, that I had somebody on my side that did believe in me, that helped me keep going. No one saw anything. I did, but I just didn't know
what it was.
I didn't know why I wasn't smart enough.
I'm glad you never gave up.
Yeah, I don't ever in general. I just cry a lot. I'm like, oh, what was me?
You keep going.
Just gonna be heartbroken over here eating my little ice cream.
I wonder too if, like, because you're so interested in the neuro part of it, if you were like, this makes more sense to me, and I'm able to like sort of pick through that. I just thinking of like things that my daughter does, like when she's like really interested in something, even if it's just like a little bit of an offshoot of something she was already trying to do, like you can see such a difference in the way that she's able to like come out of it than if it's something that she's like, I like this, but I'm not like loving it as much as maybe I should be, kind of a situation. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The things that we enjoy when we engage in it, gives us dopamine. So it depends on like what research you read. We have enough dopamine. It's just the uptake of it.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why we struggle, because that deals with our executive function, as you were talking about, which helps us to do things and to check off the list and do chores that we're not interested in. But we can hyperfixate for 20 hours on one painting because we're in it. But I think that the reason I was told, I originally wanted to be a certified nurse, registered nurse anesthetist, which is why I went into nursing. And I had some random person tell me that being a neuro ICU nurse was the way to do it. Not necessarily true. That was my goal. That was why I wanted to do it. Okay. But then once I got into neuro and I would hear other nurses, when you would say, I'm a neuro ICU nurse, they would say, oh my gosh, wow. Like that was the area that nurses and doctors are terrified of. They may crack open chest at the bedside and like put their hands on a heart and get it pumping. But the brain, it's terrifying to them. And I loved the people looked at me like, wow. And I think that wanted me to learn more and not just be a good enough person who knew the brain. I needed to know all the things. I needed people to look at me like she knows all the secrets of something that not just any quote unquote, just any nurse knows, right?
Yeah.
And I think that it was just my desire to actually prove that I was smart, to prove that I was good or worthy or valuable in this role is what initiated it.
Oh my gosh. That's like kind of gives me chills because I'm like, oh man, you kind of like were on this path and you were like, I'm going to get there. And then you got there and you were like, yes, I actually love this. So
yeah,
I keep getting chills. This is so good.
Okay. So you do a lot of ADHD education. I love your Instagram. I actually started following you like maybe a year ago. I think it was like right around, actually, I think it was, it was probably a year ago. You've been around for about a year, right?
I think that I've been around for 2 years. Going on two, I think.
I think it was, I started following you before we even started the podcast. The podcast has been around just over a year. So, because I was looking for all kinds of resources for me, to learn more for my daughter and to like how better help her and things like that. So I go to your page all the time for resources and I love your content. But is there anything that you specifically love to share and talk the most about with ADHD? Do you have like any kind of like specific thing or is just all of it?
I think it's mostly all of it, but I enjoy the funny things because they don't always get the highest amount of responses. The one that I just posted last night after I got off work has done well, but the ones that people are like, oh my gosh, that's so me. I didn't know that had to do with other people with ADHD. I love that type of content. I do have people that they reach out to me from time to time and they say, hey, can you talk more about this or can you talk more about that? Especially, no offense, guys, but I have so many men that come at me when I'm like, oh, this is what it's like to date a woman with ADHD. And they say, well, I have those same experiences, so it's not just women. And I'm like, well, that's cool. That's why I didn't say just women. But I can't talk for you because I'm not a dude.
Yeah.
And, but I'm going to tell you what it's like to date chicks because I know a lot of chicks that have ADHD.
And also I am one.
I have one, yeah. So, God, it's funny. I mean, it's funny. Like, they try to troll me, I troll right back. I
saw, what was that, like 2 weeks ago or something? Somebody said something to you and you kind of like responded, but the way you did it was like, it wasn't like rude or anything. It was just sort of like, okay, cool.
Yeah. I'm an Alabama football fan, so we know how to respond in nice ways, but very witty to put you back in your place.
I love that.
That's my whole life.
I have family in Alabama. I love that.
That's too funny.
Hopefully they cheer Roll Tide and not War Eagle. Sorry for anybody listening. Oh, good. They're good people. They're quality. I can tell.
I'm like I know some college football, but what was the second team you just said? War Eagles?
Yeah, that's right. It's not important enough to know.
It's not important enough to know.
I'm going to be Googling that later.
Roll Tide.
Is it? Oh.
Yeah.
Never
even
the right
heard
response.
of them.
I love it.
I laugh sometimes when I see, I wouldn't say like I don't know anything about sports. Like I played fantasy football for years. No, I do a little bit, but I played fantasy football for years and I absolutely loved it. But when I don't play, I just don't care that much about football. I grew up going to basketball games and football games and stuff like that. But every now and again, like something will be on TV and we were out and there was a basketball game and I was like, who is this team? I've never even heard of them. What is this?
Like Gonzaga or something, like a really great team.
It was an NBA team. And my husband was like,
same thing.
Oh, Brooklyn. That's what it was. And he was like, oh, the Nets changed their name. And I was like, what? Like, how long ago did that happen? That's how out of touch I am. So
yeah, no, my house is a sports fanatic house. So my husband has something on from a category of sports all day long.
So the Seahawks are playing the 49ers today. We live in the Pacific Northwest. So my husband grew up in Seattle, so he's a Seahawks fan, but I grew up in the Bay Area. So I'm a 49er fan. And, like, we don't like love, like, it's not like a big thing to me, but he loves the Seahawks. So anyways, I'm like, sorry, they're going to lose to the 49ers. And he's like, what are we, we're going to be watching the game. And I was like, oh, well, I'm not because I have a recording at 2 p.m. And he's like, what? like, yeah. And he's like, so you're telling me that right on the other side of your office door, like I have to be quiet because you're recording? And I was like, dude, I didn't know the Seahawks and 49ers were going to, I don't look at the football schedule.
Oh, I take off when I was a traveler, and I mean, even now, I put in advance on the important games. The Iron Bowl is when we play our rival, those Barners. But anyways, so I'm always off on that Saturday and Sunday. And the CFP I took off this year. It didn't really matter, but I'm always off for the semifinals. And that's in my schedule.
Nice.
My husband's a Cowboys fan, so it's the same thing. Yeah, same thing. He has it like in his phone. If we're driving somewhere and they're playing, he has it playing in the car. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
We were stressful watching Georgia and Ohio State. We were at a concert, and I was like, no, pull it back up.
Yep.
What? Oh my this is too close.
That's my husband and me.
No. No.
I love that little tangent, the little football tangent.
I know. I love, these are my favorite. But to get us back on track, so ADHD is kind of hard sometimes because like we've sort of talked about, like you can hyper focus on something for 20 plus hours. But then if it's something you're like feeling like maybe any kind of like, I don't really want to, like it's a little harder to get you going. Do you feel like with content creating, you ever get to that point where you're just like, I just don't want to, I don't feel like it. Like what do you do like when you do that? Do you ever get that?
You can look at the lack of consistency of my podcast and see. The answer is yes. Yes, I do. I enjoy recording it. I enjoy interviews. I love learning about people and like digging into the why and all of that. I love it so much. I just hate to edit. And I can't. It's so hard.
I know.
But the initiation of it was great. I have a lot of stuff. I think I have something from maybe a year and a half ago of a couple about ADHD and relationships. And it's edited. I just have to put it out and write up about it. And I'm like, I don't feel like it today.
Oh my gosh, you're too funny. I'm a procrastinator. So from that standpoint, I'll be like, oh, last minute. But yeah, Ramona is like that too, where she's just like, nah, I just don't. I'm not gonna. You know, your schoolwork's important though, right? She's like, I'll do it tomorrow.
Yeah, she does great. 2 minutes before it's due, she can do a 10-page research paper and probably make higher than most of the kids in her class that they started 8 weeks ago when they were supposed to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or she'll do it like you just said, and then she'll just like not turn it in.
I understand that too.
I'm like, why can't you just give it to your team? It's in your backpack. It's done.
Love that.
But is it in the backpack or is it wadded up in the corner?
I put it in the backpack.
I mean, she looks for 4 seconds and she's like, it's not in here. I'm done.
I keep getting an email that she's got some overdue library books. I finally went through her room. I found all of them. There was 13. One was from her previous school. It was a whole thing. But anyway, the ones that I know for a fact need to be returned, we're on our way out the door, and you know, she's an 8th grader, she's 14. So at some point I'm like, hey girl, like I can't do this all for you. I hand her books. I'm pretty sure they came back home with her in her backpack.
Y'all, that reminds me.
I have some library books I need to take back.
I gave up on that, but I just paid the big fees. My mom was such a saint. I played saxophone for 5 years or so. And she would tell me in the mornings, I'm getting ready for school and I have to sleep till the last minute. I know I have to be awake at 7 o'clock. Don't wake me up at 6:59. I'm going to go back to sleep for the last 60 seconds. But she would say, hey, don't forget your sax. I'm like, okay. So I bring it out of my room and I'm eating breakfast and I'm doing whatever. She's like, hey, Jamie, take your saxophone and put it by the door. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. So I'll go put it by the door and I'm needing to put my shoes on. She's like, do you have your sax? Yeah, I got it right here. Tie my shoes, walk out the door. I call about 3 hours later. Can you bring my saxophone?
Yep.
Because I left it at home. And she would, because she knew it wasn't intentional. I wasn't being a bad kid. There was just a disconnect.
Yes.
And truly out of sight, out of mind, because my shoulder was covering up the saxophone. I forgot it existed pretty much.
Yeah.
Ramona is that way. And I do my best to be like, okay, I'm on my way. Let me bring it to you again.
What a great mom.
I try.
I was the one like, nope, fuck it. You're not getting your saxophone. Sorry. Don't know what to tell you. Next time, maybe Rebecca, but not this time.
Asia, you'd do it differently though now.
I would. No, I would. I would do it all differently if I knew then what I know
what
now.
You know now. Yeah.
she'd be way more successful too, I'm sure of it.
Okay, so when I was going through your resources, remember when we were talking at the very beginning of before we even started recording, and we were talking about words that we say while we're recording, and yours was so. Mine is, I said mine was like, but it's also okay. Okay, so are you ready?
Okay, so
while I was going through your resources, I saw that you're doing like a flash emotions and ADHD webinar. It is closed. You have all the people sign up for it, sold out. But can you tell us more about it, like what it is? And do you do these very often?
Yeah, I can tell you all about it because I just recorded it before I got on with you, and I forgot to hit the record button, so I'm going to be recording it again to send to the people. I even told them, same thing, like the damn saxophone. I even said, by the way, it's going to be recorded, so just know that paid subscribers and Patreon members are going to be able to access this. I just don't want you to say anything that you don't want other people to hear that's not in this 50-person group.
Yeah.
I did not hit the record button after I said those words.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, so yes, flash emotions.
Yes. Tell us about them.
Oh my. I was married previously. I got married when I was 20, and I was married for about 7 years, and we were separated for 2 before we got a divorce. And I witnessed my mom. I'm pretty sure that she probably had some type of chemical imbalance. Okay. And there's a lot of trauma from her childhood that I was aware of. That we grew up in South Carolina before, like, I moved to Alabama. In the South, they certainly don't care about mental health. Therapy is not a thing. And of course, things have changed since 20, 30, 50 years ago. But I witnessed my parents argue often, but my mom had these emotions towards me and towards my dad. And I saw a lot of like faces breaking against the wall and things being ripped out of the wall. And when she was trying to educate me on learning how to tell time, I just couldn't grasp it. And I remember her like breaking the clock into pieces and then putting the clock back together for me to see and look at for years later. And those were very hard times. And then when I was an adult and married, I had similar emotional responses, but I didn't deal with maybe the depression that she likely dealt with. And I put a hole in a wall one time arguing with my husband at the time. And I'm a sweet person. I'm not a violent person.
Yeah.
I am very tenderhearted, but it just goes to an extreme. And it's not always anger. It's sometimes just brokenness. You feel unworthy. You don't want to be here. Like those flash emotions and emotional dysregulation that people with ADHD struggle with, it leads to self-harm. It leads to suicide attempts. Yeah. It leads to very destructive behavior against yourself as well. And at some point, I think it was probably after I put the hole in the wall that I kicked a hole. And I thought, this isn't okay. I can't do this. And I had to start figuring out, because we didn't have resources at our fingertips. This is probably in 2008 or 9. The internet has changed a lot in the last decade. But I had to start doing a lot of self-evaluation and had to start dismantling the fabric of who I was and figure out ways that I could change those responses. And once I was diagnosed with ADHD and finding out that flash emotions was something that we deal with, and it wasn't just me. I'm not a mean person when I get mad or sensitive. But one of the big things that I've learned about that has been difficult for other people who don't have ADHD in relationships with me is that if I start picking up on signals, my face is getting flushed, my heart's starting to beat really fast, I can feel right before it just goes to 1,000 degrees, I can feel what my body is doing to tell me that. And those signals, that's when I have to say, okay, I'm going to step away. I am mad right now. I'm upset. I'm hurt. And I know you're frustrated right now too. but we've got to take a break, and we will come back and revisit this. And it may be tomorrow before we do. I may sleep in another room. I don't want to talk to you right now. I don't want to see you right now. And so then that allows me to have the time to calm down. And it allows me to think about the conversation that I had that led me to that skyrocket of emotions, and to be able to say, okay, now rationally, what is the right response here? Why did I feel this way? Was this real? Was it not real? Was it just a knee-jerk reaction? And to do those things has really helped. And I also, once diagnosed, I'm married to a wonderful guy, but once diagnosed too, I also found a lot of ways for the partner of someone with ADHD, things that would benefit with communication, allowing us to take that break. Because Joe had a hard time letting me walk away because he felt like I was rejecting him by needing that space.
Exactly.
But I knew it was dangerous for our relationship. And to change the way, instead of saying, you never clean up the dishes and I'm sick of it. You like, it's just disgusting because you don't put the dishes away. I don't feel like you're helping. You want to fight? Like, do you want?
Yeah.
I'll fight
That's
you.
me.
Here, let me get my earrings off. I'm ready.
Yeah.
But for him to listen as I learned the ways to communicate, saying, hey, I really don't like when the garbage is like this. I know you're busy and I'm busy too. What can we do for us both to figure out how we can make sure it's not in the house overflowing? Like, what can we put in place? And yeah, so those are kind of some of the things that we talked about, not just what we can do, ADHDers, but the kind things that the people who love us, that we consider intimate, even parents, that the ways that they can talk to us that won't send us on that extreme feeling, because it's okay with the neurotypical people they talk to, but it's not okay for us. And we can just kind of start creating a new world and new communication.
Kind of that dialogue and just the way that you are interacting. I like that you said sometimes that break is going to be like a tomorrow conversation. One of the things that we talked about in a previous episode was this idea of like, don't go to bed angry, and you have to resolve it right away and things like that. And for me and my husband, I think he might have some ADD kind of going on that is undiagnosed, but we communicate very differently with each other. And so we figured out ways to communicate. And sometimes that does mean like we're going to bed and we might be upset with each other. And sometimes that does mean just saying like, hey, I feel frustrated right now and I'm not ready to talk about it. And that's okay. But taking that and applying that to my daughter as well, because she also has her own boundaries and her own processing and her own way of dealing with things. And I actually have never heard of it as called flash emotions before, but I really like that term because it really is what you see, when she gets upset or when she gets angry or when she gets overwhelmingly happy, it happens in a flash and it comes and goes
0
just
to
as
100. Rebecca would just go 0 to 100 as quick as she could. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes it's a range, right? Because sometimes she's feeling a lot of different things, but she's not processing them all at the same time. So she's feeling really angry right away. And then all of a sudden she's really upset right away. And now she's crying. And then now she's sort of
having
like figuring
guilt and
out
shame and everything else is coming with it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so I really like that term flash emotions because I think it's really helpful.
Even the other day, we were supposed to go out on a date, and I am very sensitive of not feeling like a priority, just in general. But my husband, he coaches basketball. He's a teacher, but he also coaches basketball. And as you know, my mom passed away in November. So I'm so vulnerable. And I was like, man, I need to go out. I don't like being inside four walls all the time. And we had agreed that we were going to go out on a date. And he had practice, which I knew, and it was supposed to be over at 6. And I had found a place for us to go play trivia and have some beer and have a good time and just, let everything go and think about something different for a minute. And at 6:45, he wasn't home. The team that he coaches is 3 minutes away. And I was sending him a message. He said, a parent's talking to me. I said, why can you not tell the parent we can talk about this another time?
Yeah.
And he ended up leaving after 7 o'clock to come home. And I texted him and I said, I'm upset, but I don't. And he gets defensive like we all
All
would
do, yeah.
naturally, right? Because he doesn't want to hurt me. He also wants to respect the parent. He cares about his player. He's
Yeah.
caught between a rock and a hard place, and he's a people pleaser because he's just a good guy. And I said, I am really upset right now, and my feelings are hurt, but I don't want you to come home angry, and I don't want to talk about it tonight. And you know what? We probably don't have to talk about it. I just need to get over this, but I'm going to go to bed, and I'll see you in the morning. And we've been great. He came home and he was okay. And I stayed in my little podcast art studio and painted for a couple hours. And it wasn't even anything worth talking about because he didn't do anything wrong. It was just a hard situation, but I could recognize how I was feeling. I was sad. I was mad, disappointed. Was it worth fighting about? No, not at all.
The fight wouldn't have changed the outcome.
No.
You know what I
No.
mean? And it would have just put bad words between you and hurt
Mhm.
feelings. So that's smart. Very smart.
Yeah. I think it takes a lot for us to recognize and be able to communicate how we're feeling. And not a lot of people, like in general, have the ability to say, like, this is what I'm feeling right now. This is what I need to do for myself. And so I think it's great that you feel like emotionally aware of where you're at. And I think that's something that we could all do a little bit better of, like ADHD or not.
Yeah.
I think it took me, I probably didn't really learn that skill until my late, like my early 30s, probably. So I
I'm
feel
40
like,
and I barely am getting it right now. Like, I think in the
yeah,
last 3 years, I've learned how to regulate my emotions when it comes to my kids and my husband way better than I ever did in the first,
yeah,
15 years. I was way more reactive and way more like quick to be defensive of my position. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Where
Yeah.
now I kind of sit back and I'm like, you know what? Let's just think about where they're coming from and why they're acting the way they're acting before I say anything. And if I am angry, I try to just remove myself now. But before, I used to be kicking holes in the walls and stuff like
explosive.
that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And the same thing goes for the non-ADHD partner too,
Yeah.
because I mean, let's be honest, you tell me that I hurt you when I feel like I'm trying to make everybody happy and I can't, because
Yeah,
that's natural. People who
Yeah.
care about other people, that's going to be things that we get in. If you tell me that I hurt you, I'm going to want to defend myself. Like, we need to
of
talk about
course.
this. And I need to explain why I'm not bad, why I'm
Yeah,
not these things. So I think that having such an emotionally mature person too, to be on the receiving end to say, okay, because it would have taken a lot for me to not say, let's talk and let me tell you why I'm not
yeah,
horrible and I didn't do these bad things for
Yeah.
you. So both people say, oh, good job for you being self-aware, but also good job for you with allowing that space and not having to have that communication too is very important.
Yeah. No
yeah.
judgment. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I have learned so much about like communication and how to communicate and emotions and feelings from my daughter, because it, like, navigating her feelings and trying to teach her like how to respond to how she feels and how to communicate that in a way that is appropriate for her and the other people that she's around, and like learning to set boundaries for herself and for other people, has been something that I never really was taught myself as I was growing up, and not something that I ever really felt like I needed to learn or look into or do. And I know for myself personally, I've really evaluated the way that I communicate with other people about how I feel about things, just in the way that I've been teaching her. So yeah, it's so important to look at that. So I love that you did this webinar. And are you doing more of them? You got more coming up?
I think I did one in November. I moved in with my parents in November, kind of. I went home and I was like, oh, I can't leave because my mom's real sick. So I called work and I said,
Yeah.
I don't know when I'm coming back. It's not going to be anytime soon. I did one then in November, and this is the first one I've done since then. But it's so strange because, one, those of us with ADHD, we have imposter syndrome.
Oh
I'm going to
yeah.
say, here are the great things about me. It's really cool. But then I'm thinking, oh, I just kind of lucked into it. Or I put a lot of effort into this. Did they really like it? Probably not. They were so nice. And that's, they were just, I'm too sweet of a person. It's a Southern accent. They don't want to be mean and upset me. And I do want to do more on different topics. The other one was the emotions behind motivation and how to
Okay.
start changing, because initiation to do things are really hard for those of
Yeah.
us with ADHD. And we talked in depth on that last webinar in November about how there's emotions connected to it and how we can start changing that so that we can be more proactive with doing things that aren't comfortable.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Yeah. And so I want to do different ones and different topics, but something that I can't just cover in a podcast in 20 minutes.
And these are on your Patreon, you said, right?
Yeah, yep. But I'm going to have to re-record this one to put on there.
We've had a couple of instances over the last year where something happened or we got halfway through an episode and half the recording was gone. And our very first episode we ever recorded, was it about imposter syndrome?
I don't think so, but it was really bad. It was about the inner voice.
Oh, yes.
Your inner voice.
Which is kind of like one of those things.
We scripted it so bad.
It was our very first episode.
And we had a script. And so we went through the whole thing and then we both just didn't like it. We were like, that was forced. We were like,
no, we're never doing this.
We're throwing that one away. And then we just started over and just scrapped ever writing anything down again or having a conversation about anything.
We ignored
everything live now.
Yeah, we ignored it for months and we were like, well, we had a whole conversation too before we recorded it. And so we're like, this is how we're going to do. We're going to talk about this. And so then when we went and recorded it, we're like, well, we literally just had this conversation. So now it just feels weird. So we ended up scrapping it and we ended up releasing it as like more of a joke. It was like a bonus episode. Like, here's our first ever episode. Good luck getting through it.
There's so much character though. The first episode.
I know. That's why we were like, we have to release it at some point because like it's kind of funny,
The one recently though, Monica and me did like 30 minutes into the episode and then we lost it and we thought it was gone. And then we came back on and literally consistently bitched for 30 minutes about how we lost that stuff. And it was still there. And it was still there.
We were both like, okay.
We're going to just push those together and put it out.
Oh my gosh.
You can see how we think.
Right? Okay, so I kind of just want to hit on this a little bit more. We kind of talked about it at the beginning of the episode.
Yeah, this is important.
ADHD in women. So
yes,
I feel like this is one of
the
those
hate.
Oh, that's what it was.
The men.
Yes. Okay, so I even wrote it in here. I saw a few posts about people telling you to stop gendering ADHD.
Yeah.
And
that's so weird to me.
Right? And this is so important to me because as a parent of an ADHD, female, I feel like it's really important to talk about why it's different and how it's impactful. And there's a couple of books that I've read that are just so great and they're just women ADHD focused. But I think that people forget like women are biologically different than men. Like we have different hormones, we have periods, we have all sorts of different things going on in our bodies. And so I just wanted to get like your input on why you think it's so important and why you're ignoring those people who are telling you not to gender ADHD.
Because that's
why
ridiculous.
Is it so important to talk about women and ADHD?
Okay, so one, why am I ignoring the recommendations that are not very nice? To do that, well, it's because it's not about them.
Right.
And I don't live my life anymore to please everyone but me. So
exactly.
if it doesn't, I also exist in the mentality that if what you do doesn't harm another person, do whatever you want to. I don't care. And that's also how I take care of other people in general. If someone comes in with a brain bleed because they did cocaine, I don't care why you're here. I'm here to love you. I'm here to care about you. I'm here to help you as much as you let me help you to get you better. So it's wild. But I have started adopting that for me too, that Good. I want to help people. I can't help every person and not every post, every podcast episode, everything that I say and do is going to fit one individual. Exactly. And I'm not doing it for you. You're not my muse up here on my wall that I look at and think, how can I make him happy today? But the reason why it is such a struggle, I had this conversation with a nurse that I was precepting yesterday who was joining our rapid response team. I was telling her how it is hard sometimes that I will tell a doctor, this is what needs to happen with this patient. This is my concern, yada, yada, yada. But then my male counterpart, who I adore, will say the same thing, and they listen. It's frustrating sometimes, and I know that other people in our society experience that frustration way more than I do. But it's because the United States especially was created to help cis white men. That's not a slam at those men.
No.
But every society is developed. They have to choose who it's going to benefit the most. It doesn't mean that other people don't get good parts of it, but there is one group of people that it benefits the most.
Yeah.
And even mental health is created to benefit cis white men the most. So when we look at ADHD presentations and symptoms, we look at what ADHD symptoms are for men, just like we do for heart attacks. We know symptoms of heart attacks, but only how they relate to men, not how they relate to women.
Car safety standards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's why it's important to me on this platform. I do love talking to guys about like what they experience too. It's cool. I love learning what their brains do and how there's similarities and how there's differences. But they already have a lot of help, and not discounting any socioeconomic standards that they have that may contribute to them not being able to seek that help or support. But as a whole,
they already have a platform.
They have it a little bit easier, especially with knowledge, than women do. And so I want to help educate women, even if they don't seek a diagnosis, even if they don't want medication, but just to feel like they're not alone, just to feel like they are not a slob, that they're not the negative things that I thought of myself for so long, that they can see themselves as the beautiful, creative, spontaneous, brilliant thinker that they really are. And that's why that's so important to me, to focus a lot on women as well, primarily.
I love that. I work in a male-dominated industry, and so I often feel like maybe I'm not being taken as seriously. I work in a team of 6, and I am the only female on my team. And so sometimes when we're in meetings and stuff like that, I feel like I'll say something, and my male counterpart will say almost the exact same thing, and people are like, "Oh, hey, good job." And I know they're not doing it intentionally, because we all get along very well. We're all friends and things like that. But sometimes I leave meetings or situations, and I'm like, I feel like I'm at the bottom of the pile, and I know that I shouldn't be. And it does really impact how I feel about my contributions at work and things like that. And so I think giving a voice to women in general, or a voice to those who kind of feel like they don't really have one, is really important. And like I said before, like having an ADHD daughter and trying to learn and navigate that for her over the years has been really difficult, because even though the school system they'll recognize, yeah, she has ADHD, and yes, we're giving her all these resources and stuff, I still feel like they don't like really grasp the way that her ADHD looks different, and the way that is, heightened in, 1 week out of the month, because her neurotransmitters are working differently, and how ADHD medication affects women differently based on their cycles and things like that. And I think there's so much misinformation out there and lack of information out there for women with ADHD. And so I just want to say thank you for giving a voice to those.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, it's so important to me as a mother.
Yeah, me too. I think that the resources, since I went through it, are so much different nowadays. And I remember they would always just say that I was using her diagnosis as an excuse to get her out of trouble, or I was using it as like a scapegoat situation, or it wasn't that bad. I was, making it worse than it was. And I look back now and I'm just like, man, if they only knew, you know what I mean, that they were totally wrong the entire time. And she really did need more help and more support and stuff. So I appreciate all of the work you're putting into what you're doing, because moms like us, that are in the thick of it right now, like she's in the thick of it. I'm already, bitch is grown, you know what I mean? I'm on the other side of it, but she's really in the thick of it. And moms like her and dads like her, parents like her, they really need that support. You know what I mean? So I appreciate all the work you're putting in.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, it's great too. Let me just give you a shout out, because as I talked about the struggles that my mom had when I was growing up, she found so many ways that things to make life easier for me too. because she got a hold of whatever she was dealing with. She really grew and changed. But to have that person in your corner, no matter what, and you may not always get the appreciation from your child either.
No, there's
Yeah.
zero. There's zero at this point.
Yeah. I mean, even my mom, I used to ask her all the time, do you think I'm beautiful? And she'd be like, of course I do. You're beautiful and you're smart. And I never believed it, but I needed that.
Yeah.
And even into adulthood, to have somebody believe in you and validate you and to say, I know that you're going through these things. I'm sorry, but I'm here with you.
Yeah.
If you ever need me, I'm going to
Positive.
sit with you. Call me 85 times a day to talk about your purple glittery shoes because you forgot to talk about them before you hung up. Just to have that person, it is a game changer. And it breaks my heart for the people who don't have those people. So whether they're young, a teenager, whether they're in their 20s and 30s and 40s, y'all are doing a good thing by being there for your daughters and to learn things and to just help them.
Oh, I love that so much. Thank you. It's like being a parent is just so, frustrating and hard. And, we're all kind of learning and different things like that. So, yeah, it's just one of those things, learning every day.
Yeah.
Do you have any resources, like ADHD resources that are just like your favorite that you recommend to people or anything like that?
Oh, ADDmag.com,
Oh, I subscribe
I
to
think.
that.
Yeah, that was the one that my psychiatrist initially off the bat told me about. It is great if you have adult ADHD, if you have children with ADHD, if you can find all the information, anything you desire at that point, and they have links to the clinical research that are associated with it so that you know that it's true
Yeah.
information. Chad is another good one. I don't know if
Oh,
it's .org. Yep, that's a
that is a
great
good
one.
one. Yeah.
Those are really my two that I go to that are trustworthy sources. But Attitude Mag is my hands down absolute favorite.
I love that. Asia froze. I don't know where she went. She just texted me. So I told her it's fine. Hopefully recording will be here and no worries. But yeah, thank you so much for like coming on and talking to us. Like I love your content. I've already told you that. I love what you're doing. Asia and I both do. And yeah, we just like appreciate that you took time out of your day.
Yeah, I
And
am so glad that you had me on here as a guest. I'm so honored. I'm sorry that my voice is like this and all that bad timing, but I didn't want to reschedule because I didn't want to miss the chance to talk with you
thank
both. And I
you.
love
Yeah.
your podcast as well.
Oh my gosh, thank you. It's been such a labor of love, and like Asia and I didn't even see it like going this far, and so like the fact that we're past a year now and we're like full up for the rest of January for guests and things like that, we're just like so excited about it. So yeah, I'm just loving the whole process of it. So yeah.
I also love that I followed you and listened to your podcast when you got in touch with me because that was awesome. I was very excited. I'm like, I just found them and I've been listening.
Oh my
So that was
gosh.
very cool.
When I emailed you and you said that, I like immediately messaged Asia and I was like, "Oh my gosh, she knows the podcast already."
Yeah.
Oh man. Okay, so tell people where can they find you? Like give us all your platforms. I'll post them in the show notes as well.
The biggest one that I'm on is my handle on Instagram is the Neurodivergent Nurse. I also have Facebook. I don't really keep up with that much because people are angry.
I don't
But
use Facebook. It scares me.
it does me too. But I do have a private Facebook group that's under the Neurodivergent Nurse
Okay.
that is not for healthcare people, but it is for people with ADHD that your family members can't see that you're part of that group, that you can go and ask other people with ADHD questions and have
Oh,
conversations.
that's awesome.
It's not super active, but there's about 250 members
Okay.
and people ask great questions.
That's still a good
Yeah.
amount of people like to just bounce like ideas and thoughts and stuff
Mhm.
off of. So I
And
love that.
they're wonderful people. I've not had one comment or post that was out of line.
Oh,
It's
that's
just a
awesome.
very great community that is just getting started there. Also, my podcast is on any platform that you like listening to podcasts on, and that
Perfect.
is the Neurodivergent Nurse on that. I also have a Patreon, and yeah,
Yeah.
so you can find me
Awesome.
pretty much anywhere. You just key in the Neurodivergent Nurse, and it's going to
I'll
lead you
find you.
somewhere.
Google
Yeah.
will find you. I'll post that in all those links in the show notes too, so people can quickly find you off of our episode. And yeah, thank you so much. I'm so excited. Asia, like I said, is frozen, and I know she's texting me. She's so annoyed to not be able to say thank you and goodbye. So I'm gonna hit the outro, and we're gonna call it a day. But don't go
All right.
anywhere.